creek and noticing fish swimming below it. So if that bank continues to erode at the rate that it is, it won't be too long before that manhole could just fall right into the creek. A couple more photos and another figure to kind of help orient ourselves. So that 15-inch pipe is coming in from the left, and the manhole that I referenced is at the top of the screen. Coming in from the other side is the 8-inch pipe from 5 Mile Line Road, which crosses the creek and is fully exposed at that location. Then it runs along the bank, which is the section that was repaired by the town in 2020. That is still in good condition. However, where it crosses the creek again, it is again exposed. So we have 3 different locations in this project area of sewer infrastructure having no protection and providing a liability for the town going forward.
Erin,
Yep.
before you move forward, so if you could point out the area really in the next picture where it's crossing, or maybe you're going to get there. The area, the 15-inch coming.
The 15-inch coming is coming here.
Gotcha.
And also, can you guys see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So yeah, this is where that 15-inch pipe that has that concrete jutting out is right in this location. So the way that we would envision approaching a rehabilitation of this would be a 2-pronged approach. One, looking into actually fixing the sewer infrastructure itself, and then the second one being addressing the stream effects on it because the erosion is what's really causing these pipes to become exposed. So Theron will get into the stream side of things, but our different options that we are looking into on the sewer side include, we plan to look into 3 different options for sewer repairs. The first of which being an in-place sewer rehabilitation. So this would be a lining of some sort, either cast-in-place pipe lining or some other trenchless method. And as long as you have access to the manholes on either side, which we would in this case, you can pull that liner through, cure it with steam, and then it creates a really hard plastic pipe within the pipe, as you see in that photo. And this can extend the life of a sewer for 50+ years. It's a very common rehabilitation method. So that would more address kind of the pipe stability and structural integrity of it. The second option that we would propose to look into would be fully realigning that 15-inch sewer. So abandoning the pipe where it crosses at its current location and instead having it cross the creek further upstream. So this would provide a new pipe, as well as it would buy us a little bit more cover over the pipe for more added protection. Something I do want to note on both of these options is that New York State DEC, when you're installing a new pipe within a creek, requires 3 feet of cover over the sewer. So in the current alignment and also in this proposed alignment, we would not likely reach that 3 feet. So we would need to coordinate with DEC and get them to work with us and approve whatever plan we went with. Lastly, the third option that we propose to look into as part of this study is a relocation of that 8-inch sewer. So this would be abandoning the 2 sections of 8-inch sewer that cross the Shipbuilders Creek at 2 locations. So those would go away, and we would have a new 8-inch sewer along 5 Mile Line Road within the right-of-way. So that would be great for the town to be able to maintain that sewer much more easily out by the road, completely eliminate the pipe from the creek. We will need to do some additional survey as part of looking into this option. The laterals that come out of all of the houses in this area come out of the back of the house towards the existing pipe. So we'll have to check the elevations of those, see if it would be feasible to get them to run towards the street side instead. And if that's not feasible, we could do grinder pumps or some other options in that area, but that'll just increase project price. So those are the 3 ways that we propose looking into fixing the sewer. And now Theron will get into the stream side of things.
Thanks, Erin. Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So where these pipes cross the creek, they're not supposed to be, am I understanding you correctly, they shouldn't be exposed?
Correct.
So how do you, what corrective action are you planning on taking so that they're not exposed?
So that would be kind of what we would need to discuss with DEC on the feasibility of either realigning or lining those pipes. We could potentially also look into doing a concrete encasement, most likely, around that. But again, because we're kind of coming into the stream, that's where we'll have to coordinate on the stream side of things to make sure that the hydraulics work and we're not kind of providing a damming effect by installing more concrete encasement across the stream.
And that might be one that I can speak to regarding the stream restoration alternatives too, because these two go hand in hand. What we'd be looking at on the stream side are methods to get the channel back to an elevation where we might be able to get reasonable cover. Whether we can meet the 3 feet or not would still be to be determined, but that's what we would be looking at. It's the
Okay.
what methods we have.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
So Aaron and I walked the stream, I think earlier this spring, late winter, and we observed the condition between 5 Mile Line and Lindsay Circle, which is the next culvert downstream. And this is the typical observance with the bank erosion conditions at the site. We have some areas where we have fairly steep banks, cut banks on the outside of the channel bend, where the stream itself has very little access to its original floodplain. It's incised over the years from erosion. So you get these meander bends that erode the exterior banks. Another thing that we commonly observe that shows that the stream is not really accessing its original floodplain is the formation of a bench at a lower level. We'll go to one of the alternatives that we want to talk about in a few minutes, but this is just essentially another sign that during flood flows or typical high flows, it's not spreading out over top of the floodplain, it's being conveyed down the channel, and because of that, it's eroding the channel bed. This particular section of East Branch Shipbuilders Creek between 5 Mile and Lindsay Circle has a significant amount of debris. Both trees and small herbaceous plants have washed into this section from flood flows and from areas along either bank where there's tree mortality and then other issues. And that's being exacerbated from bank erosion where we have trees falling in. But we noticed there's locations where blockages in the channel are the source of erosion. So during high flow events, essentially causes flow to concentrate underneath or adjacent to these blockages, and then we eat away at the banks. Another single observation we had out there was this old, was likely a farm crossing culvert that the original landowner had put in that was never removed when the housing developments had gone in. And this is causing some localized issues as well. It's not in alignment with the stream right now. And there's a significant amount of debris on the upstream or left side of this image, just off image, that's causing some additional issues. So that's something, if there were to be a larger project, that we would likely want to remove and get out of there at that point in time. Speaking of the stream stabilization options, there's typically 3 conditions that we look at. The first sort of idealized condition would be to bring the stream back up onto its original floodplain or a floodplain at a lower elevation. So that's a more, what we would call a geomorphic restoration approach. And the maximum extent of a project like that would be essentially from 5 Mile Line to Lindsay Circle if that was required. So you wouldn't need to go beyond that, but that would be the extent of it. And that's nearly 1,800 linear feet at this project site. So something a little bit less than half a mile. A more localized stabilization would look at using a combination of rock, vegetation establishment, and putting in a flood-prone bench. And if you're familiar with our flood insurance rate maps and how they have floodways, that's kind of what we're talking about, is this area where most of the flood flow would be confined, and it would reduce erosion that way. And then the third, which is commonly what we look at for smaller infrastructure projects, is in-place stream stabilization, where we treat only the eroding banks, we protect the infrastructure itself, but we don't try to alter the stream channel. And that would be something we would look at if we, for instance, the manhole that's at risk right now, we would want to protect that manhole. And if we can't change and alter the stream, we would protect that manhole in place with boulders and riprap and those types of materials. The one thing I'll say about that is that it is becoming increasingly difficult to get those types of projects authorized with the DEC in certain streams. They do like us to look at alternatives that don't use as much rock, so we have to make a case for using that type of material. In this instance, because there's infrastructure at hand, we can make that argument.
Right.
But on some restoration projects, that can be a pretty tough sell with the DEC.
What is their objections?
It's mostly habitat-based, and the fact that you don't establish vegetation on the bank quite as easily, so they want that shading factor, the
Right.
root establishment.
Okay.
Is the photo in that picture aligned to option 3?
It is more aligned to option 3, so that is an example of in-place stabilization from a project site out in Chautauqua County, where because of the size of the stream, we didn't have the option to do a lot of restoration work and change its dimensions. So we just protected the stream bank in place, and this example project is adjacent to an elementary school, and there was a playground and their septic leach field. So there was infrastructure at hand, and that's the only real approach. And we were able to get that approved with the DEC, but they did initially object.
Thanks.
I won't read through all these, but these are the list of regulations and permit approvals we think would apply to these projects depending on the scale. So there would be coordination with the Army Corps and DC and other state agencies, as well as looking at the compliance with the town zone flood damage prevention code and making sure that we're not increasing flood elevations in this area. In the most recent update to the county-wide flood insurance study, East Branch Shipbuilders Creek was added to the firms as a detailed study, so there is analysis that's already been done. Usually what that entails is acquiring the original model data and updating it with your project just to make sure that you're not creating a new hazard. So we did include this. This is some funding options that typically apply to the stream channel stabilization projects. On the left-hand side, the non-ag source, non-point source planning grants are really for concept development and analysis, and these are through the CFA program. And those are studies up from $50,000 to $75,000 that look at essentially stream bank protection, assessing a corridor as a whole to see what the issues are. And a corridor, I would mean in this case like the whole of East Branch Shipbuilders Creek is what they would think of as a scale project for analysis. Debris and sediment management, and also floodplain reconnection. So all those elements are part of this project. So if the town were interested in pursuing funding for analysis, that would be an option for a grant application here in July, potentially. And on the construction side, the WQIP grants provide up in a range of $100,000 to $2 million for different types of projects, but they require a 25% match. So we see those used commonly for stream projects. We did include this little snippet, so why we think that this would be a good candidate stream is because there are impairments listed for Shipbuilders Creek as a watershed. So DC would rank this higher as a project than some of the other streams in the area.
So lastly, the deliverables that we would present to you would be included in a memo and then another presentation like this to the board with our results from the study. That will include looking into the kind of 4 alternatives with pieces from sewer and stream stabilization in order to get a full project that will, assist the town with protecting this infrastructure and making sure that erosion doesn't continue so that it happens again. So the 4 alternatives that would be included in the memo would be the in-place sewer rehab, so that's that lining. with the localized stream stabilization. So that was kind of those just like putting riprap in around the manhole, kind of just keeping everything in place, keeping it protected.
Well, I guess I would add to that we would be looking at some localized grade changes on the stream as well to get a little more cover in that condition.
Would that one also remove some of the dead trees and stuff around there to clean it up, or just,
Yes, we would usually remove all the debris at that time, and most of those projects require some planting elements, whether that's bringing in new smaller trees and shrubs, seeding with like native species. Those plans are typically submitted with our application to DEC, and they do look for that as part of the project, if it's feasible.
okay, good.
And really to that point, when we were down there, you could see this flooding onto the people's yards. You could see the debris on their yards because of the trees and so forth blocking the creek.
Did you mention something about riprap?
Rip wrap.
What,
It's a common term used for like a large rock that we use for like road stabilization and channel stabilization.
the only other person I ever heard say riffraff was my mother.
Riprap?
Riprap.
You've seen it, John?
Riprap?
Yes,
Riprap.
P.
Okay.
Riprap.
Thanks.
It's an angular stone, right about that big.
Granite or limestone typically. It's blocky. You would know it if you saw it. But it's a dumped stone fill essentially.
Gotcha. Thanks.
No, you're good. So option number 2 in the memo would include the in-place sewer rehab, that sewer lining with a floodplain reconnection. Theron, do you want to touch on what that would?
So the floodplain reconnection is the larger sort of culvert to culvert potentially scale project where we would look at bringing the channel back up to flood grade without increasing flood elevation. So there's a balance there to be found. So that type of project doesn't use as much hard materials, less rock. It's more about grading and establishing flood-prone area and vegetation establishment. It's a larger scale project. It tends to be less expensive per like foot of stream channel because of the material difference. But it is something worth consideration because so much has changed in this location and there's so little cover.
Yeah, so the idea with that would be bring the grades back up so that we could have the cover that we need for the sewers in place. So option 3 would be that 15-inch sewer realignment, moving it so it's slightly upstream to provide us a little bit more cover with that localized stream stabilization, keeping it not the full extent of the, from culvert to culvert. And then lastly will be that 8-inch sewer relocation, bringing the 8-inch pipe back into the 5-mile line right-of-way with that in-place stream stabilization. So really, the only pipe that will be in the stream at that point would be the 15-inch and that manhole that is right in the bank, so it would really just be protecting that in place. So for all 4 of these options, they would include site plans and profiles, an opinion of probable cost, and then the permitting requirements and funding opportunities for each of them. And we are thinking that we can get this done in about 3 months after authorization, with the goal to target that CFA application deadline. It's currently not announced, but they are typically due in July of 2024.
How much would this project gonna cost?
They don't know yet.
So
Just an estimate.
So, I'll take this. So really, the purpose of this, this workshop was to share the information and share the options that if the town board would like to move forward to explore all 4 of these options, B&L will give us a opinion of probable costs and so forth. I believe the cost to develop these 4 options to this level is about $20,500.
That's right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just one other question, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this or not, but I know the grant was, what, 100,000 to 2 million with a 25% match?
yes, it is dependent on category of project, but yes.
Right. Would they accept in-kind services as part of that 25% match? Because I'm thinking a lot of this debris, potentially, these trees could be cut down and removed by the town.
I'd have to look into that, but I think it's cash match. But I know that some municipalities have used labor and in-kind labor
Right.
and materials for portions of their match. I'd have to check the grant stipulations to see if it's only cash.
So that leads me to my next question. And because in my hometown, we had an incident probably 10 years ago where it was massive, massive rain, and it sits in a valley. And there was so much debris in this creek that ran from outside of town through farmers' fields and down, that it completely flooded the downtown. I mean flooded the downtown, flooded houses, because all of the debris, due to the volume of water, it broke loose and it all carried it down. And all the banks, on both sides of the banks of that creek, all the way up to out of town, had never been maintained, which caused the problem. And I don't know if the town's responsibility to periodically go in there and remove some of these trees. I don't know, but do you have any knowledge of that, or?
I don't know whether it's a town responsibility. Pat Stevens may have a little better opinion on that, or Josh, dealing with the floodplains and so forth. I don't know whose responsibility is to maintain that.
All right, because clearly that hasn't been done in, I'd say, decades, looking at that.
Generally, the requirements to maintain stream banks falls on the homeowner, or the property owner.
Interesting.
In my time working on DEC regulated projects, I've not seen great guidance for what we would call stream maintenance or
Right.
removal of debris. Some states have that, and DC doesn't seem to have like a good, strong guidance on what you can and cannot do. I know that your neighbor, the town of Penfield, does take on some of those projects, but I think that's on town-owned property and in parks.
Right.
Because their maintenance crews, I believe, pursue channel cleaning and some similar types of projects. They do have to get that permitted, but they kind of have like a schedule. And a lot of that's more related more to like residential drainage problems and drainage of some of their own parks and facilities.
It's
I
interesting.
I can be sure that every resident who might be listening tonight is totally shocked that they're responsible to maintain it.
I was just gonna say that, how do residents, I would imagine residents don't even know, because you think about some of the open spaces and park spaces, you're not really allowed or supposed to touch them, which is the complete opposite of this, where it's your responsibility to be making sure it's free of debris. So that's
And to your point, the
interesting. I didn't
DEC
know that.
doesn't really have, they're not very involved in ensuring that these banks are taken care of, so why would the homeowners know? They wouldn't.
The limits of the guidance that I've seen from DEC is that they'll allow someone to go in on foot and remove like a tree that's fallen, but they do not like homeowners or anybody going into the stream with equipment or heavy machinery without a permit. So there's kind of like this fine line with what you can accomplish even as a
Right.
homeowner.
I also will say that when we were walking the stream, we came upon a homeowner who was wondering what we were doing, and we explained to him, and he was like, "Oh, I've experienced, some flooding in the back area and stuff like that," and he was interested in. We were telling him about some grant programs, like what's it called, Trees for Tribs, about like planting things along tributaries to help prevent the erosion and stuff like that. And he was interested, but yeah, definitely he was concerned about the stream as well. And was looking into ways of trying to help.
Well, thanks
fix
for the
it.
pictures, and clearly we need as a town to be doing something,
Yeah.
like urgently. I
But
think
we-
the days of looking the other way are long since past.
But we can't really move forward until we do this to determine which
Correct.
resolution is the best.
So if I understand correctly, and I know it wasn't in the presentation, but if it's about a $20,000 cost to do the 3-month project to give all those deliverables that you just said, tight to the CFA deadline of July 30th, we're assuming that's when it is. So if we queued up a resolution for next Thursday, May 2nd, to get into that contract for $20,500, not to exceed or whatever, and authorize the supervisor to sign it, away we go. If the board votes at that time to approve that. Is that accurate?
Seems that way to me.
Yeah.
It's my understanding.
Okay. If that's the path, I would say two things. One, please get us something, I mean, this is nice, this is very nice. But the contractor proposal for the 20,000 and delivers, if you can get that to us as early as possible, so the board can review it, so they know what they're voting on next Thursday, that would be very advantageous. And because it's a 3-month deliverable that you put here, I would ask, is it possible to have that be a 2-month deliverable? Because as we are working with various firms, whether it's Barton and LaJudas, whether it's our grant writing firm for CFA, and there's potentially, well, you name some of the grants that are available in CFA, there may be others, I don't know. I don't want this to go right up to July 27th, you're presenting it to us, and it's like, okay, we got 3 days to apply for the grants. We gotta decide which option we're taking. The town board would need more time to look at the cost and the scope of each of those 4 options to decide which one we think is the one to go for, so, if any, and then have the time to then appropriately plan for applying for the grants. Does that make sense?
Yes. And 2 items of note, you already have the proposal. We sent it to Art earlier, so
It should be in your folder, Supervisor. If not, you have it.
It's not, but that's okay.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah,
of
the
things
collection.
moving around today, I'm sure that was
Absolutely.
my fault.
No, no,
you
it,
know.
well, it's in your office, you have it.
Perfect. So that means that if that's a proposal in my office, it'll be in each of the town board members' email as a PDF before tomorrow's end.
By 6:15 tomorrow morning.
What time?
Thank you.
Even better, Art, take that responsibility off of me.
Absolutely.
You're the man. Hey, you know what? We slotted you for 15 minutes, but I gotta tell you, I gave you a lot more time because this is one of the first things I did as supervisor. Art took me down through the mud and muck a couple years ago when this thing was gone haywire. I was a rookie supervisor. I really didn't know what the heck I was looking at. Unfortunately, Patty, you'd agree with this too, being the sewer liaison. I've learned more about sewer in the last 4 years than I ever imagined I would, and I do know this is a major problem. And it's one that the DEC, I don't think, is gonna have much more patience on with us. So we do have to do something,
Certainly seems that way, a lot of risk there.
yeah. So, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Paul, I hope you didn't have a court time for pickleball.
Not tonight, Tom, that was last night,
All right.
even though I'm not supposed to be.
Oh,
So our second item tonight is our esteemed finance director, Paul Adams, who's going to give a presentation, update of present, past, present, future on the ARPA funds, the COVID, thank you, Aaron and Darren. Because you remember when COVID was well, COVID I guess still is a thing, but when we were shut down and all that, and the federal government gave municipalities money and blah, blah, I think we got $4.1 million, and we've been parsing it out, I guess, and making decisions as a town board. And I think we're to the next milestone in that process, and Paul will explain it.
Yeah, it's time to talk ARPA again. So, just give you a little recap of some of the history over the past couple of years. So the town received the initial funds in July of 2021, which was about half, about $2 million. And the other half was received about 1 year later. So in total, there were 4,050,860,000 received. The U.S. Department of Treasury developed certain rules for spending the funds. They came out with something called the final rule in April of 2022, and we've used those as the guidelines for the funds that we have spent thus far. So the funds, here are some of the ways the funds can be spent. They can be used for public health emergencies. They can be used to combat the economic impact of COVID-19, which could be related to some businesses or nonprofit agencies within the town. Can be used to fund the loss of revenue since there were shutdowns during COVID, obviously, which ground a lot of things to a halt and basically cost the town quite a bit of revenue. The funds can also be spent for general government services, which kind of offers a wide range of alternatives. They can be used for premium pay for essential workers, such as police or healthcare workers. And they can also be used for water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So, thus far, we did utilize $350,000 for what we called economic impact. These were grants provided to 14 nonprofit organizations throughout the town of Webster. That was paid to them in July of 2022. We also utilized $2.5 million for the first portion of the town's energy performance contract with Navitas, which was related to the planning and development stage of the wastewater treatment Phase 2 project. There was $33,900 spent in regard to environmental testing related to 600 Ridge Road and the West Webster Hamlet. I think this was actually environmental remediation work that was done through Monroe County Department of Environmental Services. So, in addition to what we spent thus far, the final rule says you also have to obligate funds by the end of 2024. So, thus far, in addition to the money spent, we have obligated $302,000 for premium pay to our police officers, and this is in conjunction with the recently settled police union contract. As of last week, we actually paid the first portion of this, which was $132,000. It was paid in the payroll dated April 19th to 33 officers. So the remaining use of funds, there's $864,760 remaining, which is not obligated and not spent. So the final rule, adds significant flexibility to the use of these funds. So there are many different ways in which they can be utilized. We elected what was called the standard allowance. As I mentioned earlier, there was a lost revenue option. The town had the choice to actually try to calculate how much revenue was lost, or the other option was just to adopt standard allowance, which allows you to take up to $10 million and spend it on government services. The proposed use of remaining funds. As I said, they must be obligated by the end of this year, 2024. So by obligated, I mean they must be under contract. And those obligated funds must be spent by December 31st of 2026. So possible use of the remaining funds. The possibilities we've listed here are either already obligated or have a high probability of being obligated by the end of the year. We have the dog kennel project coming up. We did receive a grant for that, but there is a match which the town will have to contribute to. The highway building project, which is well underway, that is already obligated, so that's a good option. The Sandbar Park Phase 2 and 3 projects, which I think have a pretty good chance of being under contract by the end of 2024. The Sandbar Park building, the same, also a good chance of being under contract. And the West Webster Hamlet, there's a grant we've applied for there, which would require a significant match. That would be another possible use. So just in summary, so far we have received $4,050,860. Of that amount, there's $2,883,900, which is spent, it's already expended. We've obligated $302,000, of which $132,000 was actually spent last week. And then we have future obligations of about $865,000. So the total spent through March 31st is just short of $2.9 million. Remaining funds to be spent, about $1,166,000. And I used March 31st because that's the period of time that the federal government uses for measuring. I report based on the fiscal year, April 1st through March 31st, and there's actually a report due at the end of April, which is just a few days from now. So I was thinking it'd be great if we knew how the remaining funds would be obligated prior to me filing that final report. If not, it's not the end of the world, but it'd be nice to put this one behind us. So the question tonight is, what do we do with the remaining $865,000?
I think the dog kennel is a really good one, since you have to have the match, and we already have the grant. It's a
Right.
great way to round that one out. Could the money be used for the project, the Shipbuilders Creek? Like
Another
the
possibility.
assessment fee? Whatever, the $20,000, I imagine that's not in the budget somewhere already, so that would be a good way to fund at least the evaluation of what the options are. I'm not sure that they'll be able to implement that fast. If they can implement it really fast, some of the money could be used for the remediation over there.
It's interesting, and Jennifer, it's a great idea. We've struggled, interestingly enough, with this $4 million. It's like winning the lottery. All of a sudden, everybody is our cousin and our friend. And we also have suffered a little bit from recency bias, like the thing that we heard most recent, like, hey, should we use the money for that? It's happened a lot over the last couple of years. One of the reasons that Paul and I got together on this, I don't want to be redundant to him, is that he's got a report he's got to file by April 30th. Well, I'll get to that in a second. I just want to say that, as you saw from this report he just gave, sewer has received a lot. And it came up, I don't know, Jennifer, if you were on the board, I'm losing track of time, but we bought a new flush truck. And we went back and forth as a board a couple months ago on, well, where's that money come from? Were you on the board at the time?
I was not.
It ended up a 3-2 vote that it came from the sewer reserve, and we didn't split the thing in the middle and say we'll take money from ARPA. And at least the board members who voted against the ARPA were like, I don't want to speak for them, but sewers received a lot of that $4 million. And we wanted to have some semblance of fair, not that life is fair, counselor, right? But it just seemed like we have other projects in town that this money could be used for. I know that Deputy Supervisor Cataldi at one time said, I don't know if it was here or whatever, that, well, you certainly wouldn't want to take 800,000 projects and give each of them $1. Exaggeration to make a point. So what is a material amount of money to give to a project where it makes a difference? And we could debate that all day long. Is it $50,000 a project? Is it $200,000? So when Paul and I started talking about this, I said, Paul, here are the usual suspects, and it's on the second to last page. The dog kennel, the highway building, Sandbar Park, actually phase 2 and 3, the building at Sandbar Park, which is the bar restaurant, and the Westchester Hamlet, 600 Ridge, or the Hamlet, totally. And I would add also to this, I'm going to add a sixth one here, which is potentially those solar-powered speed monitoring things. So I'm going to put them down there. All right, solar-powered. I'll write it on mine. So there you got 6 different projects, $860,000. It's about $140,000 a project if we're fair. But we really don't have to be fair tonight, because as Paul said, if this board says, hey, Paul, file the April 30th report and put in there these 6 projects that we are dovetailing toward December 31st, because you have to commit the money, you have to be in contract on the money by December 31st, 2024. I don't want to be redundant to Paul, but any one of these 6, there are things that will come up that may mean we're not going to be in contract by December 31st. So the money, any dollar decision we make tonight is an estimate at best, because over the next 8 months, things will happen or not happen that will change this. And you might find that the dog kennel, once they reconstrue the thing, it doesn't need $140,000 in
Well, only-
matching funds.
So we have 400,000 right now in a grant. 20% we have to come up with, 80,000.
I gotta be honest with you, don't quote me, I think it's 10%. Our minimum skin in the game on the dog.
It's only
kennel.
10%?
Yeah.
Where did I
But,
get 20%
John,
from?
don't go down the rabbit hole, because I'm gonna tell you this right now. When I saw the estimate of the dog kennel, I just about passed out. And I said to you earlier, that's because Ags and Market wanted it a certain way with contingency, this and that. Now that we've got the money, let the engineers reconnoiter the thing and come back to us in a couple of weeks with what the cost is. And if the cost is $540, pulling that number out, hey, 400,000 grant, 140 from this money, we got a deal. But what if they come back and it's 440, which we only need to do 10% match on the kennel, that's 40,000. Well, we just moved 100 of the 140 that we kind of earmarked to the dog kennel. That could be spread to the highway building, or the Sandbar Park Phase 2, or the bar restaurant, or the Hamlet, and whatever. Over the next 8 months, I want to stress this. I said to Paul, it would be kind of nice to post our score on April 30th with, hey, these are the projects. You saw throughout this, we have flexibility. But what we don't have flexibility on, we need to have the money in contract by December 31st, 2024. We don't have to make a decision tonight on what we're putting into contract. We got $864,000 left that is not earmarked and not in contract. Unequivocal, irrefutable, in 8 months, we better have that earmarked and under contract. So Paul is coming here tonight in advance of a couple days when he files that report. I don't want the board to overthink this. If the board says those 5 projects, or 6, whatever, seem to be, they're not recency bias, they're ones that we know are going on, whatever, why don't we earmark the money for that? I don't know if you have to put in that report, Paul, that each one is $140,000, which times 6 or whatever adds up to $864.
I write a narrative, but I could write the narrative that the 864 includes these 5 things,
Or
That-
6.
That'll give us some
Okay.
flexibility.
And then the board, and I want to stress this, over the next 8 months, and I don't want to be sitting here in between Christmas and New Year's and like, oh my God, our lack of preparation has become a crisis. We need to figure out how to contract and which money to use. That's not going to happen. Organically, the kennel, because we have to be in contract on that thing with Ags and Market within 3 months and break ground, I think the actual number will manifest itself to us. I'm going to tell you right now, the highway building, that's the plug. I know that's an accounting number, but basically, a highway building, unfortunately, is not one that gets grant money potential. So it'd be kind of nice that whatever we can't use from these other ones because either we can't get in contract by the end of '24, or the kennel doesn't take 140,000 and only needs 40,000, the plug should be the highway garage. Does everybody understand what I mean by that?
Yes.
I think that's the way to go.
I agree.
Sandbar Park Phase 2 and 3, I don't even know, really, to tell you the truth, if we're going to bring that to the board for design and those things in the next couple months. I kind of want to see how the bar restaurant goes. I think we're making progress on that. But there's 8 months left. The West Webster Hamlet, I gotta tell you, we're knock on wood, we're queuing up the demolition of the garage by Memorial Day. What will we do next when we go and drill into that, and what's gonna manifest itself, and what grants come back awarded for what we went for? These are the type of things that will give us information over the next 8 months that will guide us on how much of the money to use on each of these 6 things.
These are the right project. I think these are the right list of projects for the reasons you outlined. Clearly, the highway is the plug because it's already under contract. You're not gonna be scrambling at the end of the
No.
year. That's great. And then the Sandbar Park and the building and the hamlet and, maybe less so the dog kennel, but really has a huge impact on the community. Like that West Webster Hamlet is something that I think everybody in Webster talks about, whether you're on the east or west side of Webster, they care about that intersection. So, you know,
I think
that
we're all in
being the
agreement with those 6
case,
topics.
what's that?
I said, I think we're all in agreement regarding the projects.
I would agree. My question when we saw this, because we did all receive these suggestions much earlier, maybe last week, my concern goes back to, I didn't quite say $1 to all of them.
It was an
But since,
example.
no, I know. But since we don't really know the cost, obviously we know the highway building. We're still a little uncertain of the dog kennel, but we don't know what we're looking at for the others. Again, I don't want to I would like to see this money be transformational to some a project or two, or whatever it takes. So if we're looking at a huge amount for these, and we're going to throw 140 at it, to me, that's not making a big impact on that project. So I'm very much in agreement that the 6 we're looking at is a good place to start. And as we start to get these prices and these costs coming in, we'll be able to make a better decision on that.
Patty, I agree with everything you said, but as my daughters like to call me, the buzzkill,
You do that.
even if we put it all toward the highway garage, it's not transformational for that
Well, no,
project.
and that wasn't my suggestion.
Yep.
But yes,
As a plug, at least it helps pay for
Yes.
that and minimizes what we have to go into debt on.
right.
I mean, it might end up that these 5 projects or 4 over the next 8 months end up having each 230,000 or 220 toward them, and the highway gets nothing. But it's just so hard to tell.
No, I agree.
You know, and we'll, I guess, along the way, kind of have interesting discussions on what defines, did you use the word transformational? No, you used, yeah. It's a tough one. Because you could say that, why are we using this for the dog kennel when, if the dog kennel, don't quote me on this, costs $500,000, we already got $400,000 of grants.
No, but then we're done with it. So to
That's
me,
true.
that's, yeah,
But no taxpayer money,
exactly.
no bonding, whatever. There'll be some interesting discussions over the next 8 months. But
But I think this list is a good place for Paul to start and report, and we'll continue to work on it.
you got your marching orders, Paul?
I think I understand.
I think you do.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Paul, for keeping this.
Well, I gotta
forefront.
tell you, that concludes, I think, tonight's workshop. I don't have to use this, right, Charlie, on a workshop?
You can, though.
I
if you
don't want to.
All right, then you don't
Like
have to.
that, and say, have a good evening, everybody.